All right, it's final segment with Clint Kelly. He's our malpractice attorney, taking your phone call, 737-7587. Some lines open if you want to jump in. I was just talking to him about various different cases that he handles, and we've done stories on them in the past. Do most malpractice cases settle, or do you end up litigating?
Most settle.
Most settle. Mm-hmm. And this is, I mean, sometimes you'll advise this is a fair settlement, let's do it. Have you had cases where you've had clients where there was an offer that you thought was great, but they insisted on going to trial?
Yes.
And you're like, all right, but you know that trial's never a guarantee.
Right. I mean, you go through all of the advice that would be required in that situation. You give your professional judgment. At the end of the day, it's the client's choice. The client's the boss. And if the client says, look, this isn't enough for me, I hired you, Mr. Kelly, as a trial lawyer. My job's to try cases.
Right.
And so if the client decides that they want to go against my opinion, I'll try the case. And there have been situations where the client was right.
Yeah, and you
got more money than what we thought we would get for the client. In the situation of going to trial, and the client was wrong.
Yeah, and they end up getting nothing.
End up getting nothing.
Which means you got nothing too.
That's true. But that's part of the job.
Now, you have actually turned down cases before that come through the door that are clear cases of where someone was wronged, but there's no financial. I want to hit on that. I mean, you've actually said to someone, you know what, you have a case, but there's no financial means here.
The damages just simply aren't significant enough to warrant a lawsuit. And, you know, there's some people that would say, look, that's not fair.
Right.
Everybody's case should be heard in court, even the smaller ones, and I understand that, and there is a lot of merit to that argument. But the resources that are involved in evaluating a claim, pursuing a claim, from the doctor's standpoint, defending the claim, it needs to be a significant injury. And I've told you many times before, Nick, a jury these days, they're just not going to compensate patients unless it's a serious injury. And you got somebody coming in a wheelchair,
right? That
injury speaks for itself. That witness doesn't even have to get on the witness stand. Every day the jury comes in, they see that person in the wheelchair. That's like testimony.
Yeah.
But they go into a courtroom and they see somebody who walks in and walks out who may have had a small burn or scar or something like that. They don't get that same impression. They don't hear that same type of nonverbal testimony, and it makes a big difference. A death, you got a spouse there, and you know there's an empty chair next to the spouse.
Oh, sure.
That speaks for itself.
Okay. So it depends, case by case, as it goes that way. In terms of getting someone who accepts, I'm trying to think, when you go into trial, the expenses that you need, you're paying for an expert doctor to come in and testify to standard of care?
Doctors, plural.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this is all coming out of your pocket as...
Right. There's the litigation fees, court reporters, videographers, the people who video the depositions.
Right.
Obviously, the experts are the lion's share of it because the doctors are, you know, they're professionals. Their time is busy and it's expensive, so you have to have those, and you have to bring them to court. So you have travel expenses associated with that in addition to your own travel. There's litigation research, medical research. In some cases, you'll need to have medical animations done or illustrations done of a particular anatomical part in order to explain the injury and how it could have been prevented to the jury. All those expenses are fronted by our firm to get the case to trial and ultimately to try the case, which is why we have to be very careful in the type of cases that we take.
Yes, you have to be selective on the types of cases that come into play. By the way, the hospitals sometimes, you've said you've had various cases, some that, you know, unclear, 50-50, some are no-brainers, right?
Right.
All right, and I wanted to ask you about the one case that obviously got a lot of attention. I always like mentioning it to you, the infant that had the tongue cut on. And that's still in litigation now?
It is, and we're at a crucial point, so it's hard for me to discuss it right now because of where we're at, but there's no question the doctor
it's where they
wrong.
They mistakenly...
He admitted he was wrong. I mean, there's no doubt about it. It's just a question of whether the child has sustained damages to his tongue, and also mother has a claim for being subjected to emotional distress by this because, you know, as we've discussed in the interview, this was a very traumatic thing to happen to her in the nursery when her child was hours old.
Sure. So what's the trickier thing to deal with there? Proving whether or not this child may have problems years down the line because of this, and hopefully he heals up and it's okay,
right.
Or that this mother is suffering from this condition, even though her child appears to be okay.
You know, ironically, Nick, I think the trickier deal is proving the child's injury to the tongue, because the child is Nate's a year old.
Okay.
There's a lot of time left for him to grow. He's not talking like you and I. He is able to eat, but he's not eating on his own. There are a lot of things that are left to be developed for him. Mama, on the other hand, Mama definitely has had problems, and it's easy to prove. Mama's gotten some psychological and psychiatric help to get her through this. It's like post-traumatic stress disorder.
She's so upset about it.
Her injury is manifest. I mean, you can see it, you can feel it, you know what she went through. That's not as tricky as what we're going to have to prove in terms of the boy.
And I would think that would be an easier sell to a jury if it ever came to that. Because, I mean, a jury's sitting there saying, how would you feel if this was your child on what should be a joyous occasion, okay? Baby just delivered, and you think everything's peachy fine, and then he comes back and he has a little blood on his lip, and they performed surgery on the wrong child.
You remember it was that it was like a virus, and it went out on the internet like crazy.
Yeah.
I just read some of the comments. There were thousands of comments.
Yeah, what would they? Yeah,
a lot of them were from women who were just outraged that this had happened.
Yeah.
And so it's understandable that Mama would feel the way she does.
If anything was learned from some of that I took from you, and I would think about this for anyone who's having a child in the future, more and more hospitals now leaving the babies in the room with the mother.
Yeah,
as opposed to a nursery.
Yeah, that's one way you make sure that there's not going to be a case of mistaken identity. Is mother's there with daddy, with the baby, and if a pediatrician comes in and wants to perform a procedure, I mean, the first thing mom's
going to ask, what are you doing?
What are you doing?
Right.
But I'll tell you, in this case, I can say this, in this case, it's undisputed. There was a procedure called a timeout procedure that was supposed to be used to make sure that the doctor was operating on the right child, make sure he had the right identity. And he shortcutted that procedure.
How does that procedure work?
Everybody steps back.
Okay.
The doctor identifies the patient, looks on the armband, looks in his chart, asks the nurse, look and make sure the consent form is signed by the mother,
right.
So you can match the mother's signature to the baby's name. Then you know you've got consent. Well, in this particular case, the consent form was not signed by mother. The doctor knew it and went ahead with the surgery anyway, because he, in his mind, believed that he had the right child. He transposed the children.
Okay.
He was thinking of another child having permission to do this and mix it up with the Melton baby.
And innocently enough, but just that's why we have protocol. Right? That's why, I mean, human error. This guy made, I assume, an honest mistake. He didn't mean to do this, but that's why you can't, and that's what's scary, man. You cannot, in a hospital especially, take shortcuts.
Nick, how many times we get on an airplane and we assume that the pilots will follow the checklist to the letter before that plane gets off the ground.
Right.
And the reason for that is we don't want to leave things up to memory.
Right.
Because as you say,
people make mistakes.
People make mistakes. That's why we have checklists. That's why we have procedures. And it's really no different when we look at timeout procedures in advance of surgery, because there's still people that get their wrong elbow operated on, the wrong leg operated on, wrong person identified. I had a case last year. A woman had the wrong ovary taken out because these timeout procedures are short-circuited. And the only explanation I can come up with is the fact that the volume of the surgeries is going up and the time allowed for those surgeries is coming down. And so the safety margin to take the time to make sure it's being done right is being lessened and becoming more narrow.
Gosh. All right, let's put the information up for Clint Kelly. Remind folks who they'll be talking to again, and there it is, your office. I've been there before, Hendersonville, Tennessee, and 629 East Main Street. Okay, so if you call that number,
ask to speak to Nurse Kathy, and that's all you got to say. I want to speak to Nurse Kathy. My office will immediately route the call to Nurse Kathy, and she's usually available right then and there. Yeah. Tell Nurse Kathy about your case. She'll report back to me, and then I'll report back to you, probably in writing, to let you know whether or not I think the case
if she gets enough to make you think it is, then that's something where you'd have them come in.
I would. At that point, I would pick up the phone. I would call the patient, say, get in, come see me.
What do you want them to bring with them usually if they have it?
If they have the medical records, and surprisingly a lot of them do.
All right,
bring your medical records with you.
How easy should you have access to all the medical records?
Should be very easy. You go to the healthcare provider and say, give them to me. Yep. You have a legal right to all of your medical records.
Right, and they have to give them all to you. Clint, as always.
Yeah.
Awesome show. Appreciate it.
Good
It's
way to start 2017.
Not bad. We had some good calls this morning, and we'll see you again as we do every month. But have a great 2017,
Thank you,
my
too.
friend. It's good to see you. We'll take a break. I'll be back. We'll have that information up for you one more time and programming note about tomorrow right after this. Stay with us.